All right, Eileen, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. And we're going to talk about how to get a position in this virtual environment. What's different between the pre-COVID and post-COVID interview process and the struggles of trying to get a job in a virtual reality. Couple of things. I'm going to go through a couple of tips first and also some ideas about what is different. How are things different? First of all, I think the most important thing is that most people are at home or in a shared environment, and it's difficult to find that space where, one, it's quiet, you won't be interrupted. Two, you have a nice background, even though you can do virtual backgrounds, and we'll talk about that today. And three, where you actually feel comfortable and at ease talking with somebody who you've never met, you've never seen, and you're meeting for the first time via your computer on Zoom. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is preparation for the interview. And I think that's critical. Several things that I did today. I started about an hour ago. And some people will think, oh my God, she's old. She just takes her too long. And I would never do that. But one of the reasons why I say that is I set up my laptop. I turned it on. Was the Wi-Fi working correctly? I wanted to make sure, 5 minutes before the interview, you don't want to find out that your Wi-Fi is down or that you have, something going on with your laptop. It's suddenly going through its normal update and you can't stop it. So knowing that an hour ahead, you can grab somebody else's laptop. You can figure out a solution. The other thing is the lighting, being able to just sit down real quick, check the lighting, make sure that the person is going to be able to see you well. You're not facing the shadows because again, this is your first impression, and first impressions are really important in a virtual world. They don't get to, see all the nuances of you when you walk in the room and then everybody sizes everybody up. This is a two-dimensional environment. And so all you have is your presentation. Some people feel that it's great to use a virtual background. Others feel that that's extremely distracting because as you move, the virtual background, changes with whatever you're wearing. And sometimes, it can be a bit, the person's trying to concentrate on what you're saying. So to the extent that you can, but if you can, it's understandable, but to the extent that you can, I'm sitting in the living room in front of my fireplace. And I specifically chose this. It's on a stack of cushions because I didn't have a table this high, but I wanted to make sure that I had that really good, beautiful background. The other thing is, when I sat down, I made sure that you are not looking up my nose. You'll see a lot of people will have their computer on their desk and they'll have this backwards like this, and you're looking up their nose. No interviewer wants to sit and look at you in this manner. They also don't want to look at you like this, where you're sitting so close or your body is halfway because you're trying to look through your screen in a way that it's best for you, but it's not best for the interviewer. The other way is when you're sitting here and you're looking up, at everything. So again, you have to remember, you don't have the opportunity to just walk in and sit down where the chairs are leveling you out and the person gets to see all of you. So you have to push it back. I even took a picture of myself. I just wanted to make sure it looked pretty good. And the other thing is you have to decide your look. Are you going for a corporate job where, the first interview, everybody's going to have on a suit? Are you interviewing for a position on the East Coast where people are more dressed up? Are you interviewing for a technical position where potentially maybe if you have on a suit, people are going to think that you're stuffy and, so I suggest to people to find that casual medium. I have on a sweater and a dress and, I have a tendency to wear black just because I do. But if you're going to wear color, try it out first. Make sure, all you have to do is take a picture of yourself and show it to somebody. Show it to your mom, then show it to your best friend, right? You get the older person's opinion and you get your cohort's opinion. It's important. Again, you only get the first time to make that first impression. The other thing that I did when I sat down, before I sat down, I went outside and I put a sign over my doorbell that said, "Do not ring, interview in process." I would do the same thing if I were in my bedroom. Do not ring, interview in process. I can't tell you the number of times I get messages from my kids that say, "Mom, I have an important call with my boss from 3 to 4." You know, and during that time, we just respect the house and everybody freezes. You know, you go sit down, you read a book. It's not a great idea to try to do an interview outside. You can't predict, you know, the one time the garbage truck is going to go by. The other thing is, you have to remember, when is garbage day? I had a really important meeting the other day and I forgot that they switched garbage day from Tuesday to Wednesday. I live on a corner and the truck stopped for a good 15 minutes. And I literally had to carry luckily I have a good path up to my office. I had to carry my laptop up to my office quickly and change my environment, but it worked because I knew I had another office environment. It's a little darker, but it still worked for me, and I could get away from one side of the house to the other. It sounds kind of funny that you would need to worry about thinking through these things, but if you realize that in a non-virtual environment, you're going into a conference room. The whole purpose of that conference room is a protected environment space with no noise and no distractions, so the person can concentrate on you. So that's another reason why you want to make sure that, again, you know what day it is, you know what's happening, you send notes out to people and you say, need the quiet time, need the space. The next thing is to talk about what you're wearing, more about what you're wearing. I have these blingy glasses on right now, and I don't know if I was interviewing whether I would wear these. It's much more professional if I have on my standard black ones. And if I were interviewing for a job, these are what I would wear. Again, it depends. Now, if I was interviewing for the Real, or some other organization where everyone is dressy and trendy, these would come on in a heartbeat. So what the answer is, what position are you interviewing for, and what type of company is it? I don't think that changes regardless of whether it's virtual or not. I think I would do the same thing if I were going to an interview with a bank. I would have on, the black ones, versus if I were going to an interview with a Macy's retailer or something like that, where I wanted to show them I was, a trendy person or had style. The last thing is, your decision on your look. 10 minutes before you get on, brush your teeth. You are in a computer environment. So of course, you don't know what their screen looks like. You could be, front and center. And the piece of broccoli would make a difference. I always tell people, and I did it right before I started with SWA. I said, just a second, I went and blew my nose, and I have a tissue here. The other thing is, when you walk into a conference room, they give you a bottle of water. Where's your bottle of water? Make sure you have one next to you. It's important for several reasons. When you're interviewing, the type of interviews that people are willing to do, and it's virtual, are much more direct, much more focused. When you're in an interview in a non-virtual environment, people kind of size you up right away, and kind of it switches. You go from having this great conversation because it's three-dimensional, and the person sometimes never even asked you some of the interview questions they intended to, because you just vibe. Well, it's hard to vibe in a two-dimensional world. So be prepared with that glass of water, and I don't have a table here, so I have mine, and make sure it's a nice one. I mean, again, it's all virtual, right? I'm not going to sit here with something crazy on a glass. I'm not going to sit here with, a bottle, but the most important is, this is a stop. This allows you to stop for a second. So if somebody asks you a question that you need to think, it's kind of awkward to pause in a virtual world, but it's easier to pause when I have my glass. You said, excuse me just a sec, take a sip, put it back, and you say, oh, and then you give your answer. You don't want to do that more than, once, but when you actually need that pause, make sure you do. The other thing is to make sure you're sitting in a place where you're not going in and out of the screen like I am right now. So do as I say, not as I do. The next thing is bring a pen and paper to the interview. I know lots of people don't, but it is extremely distracting to see somebody like this in an interview. And then you forget to say, oh, and by the way, I'm taking notes. So the person may presume, since you're down here and up and down here and up, that, what is she checking her Instagram? You know, it's like, wait a minute, that, you know. So the goal is, if I'm sitting here and you tell me something that I need to say, first of all, I've got my pen, I'm using my hands, and you know, that's great. Do you mind? I'm just going to take a really quick note, and I take a note. When I go sideways on my notes, it looks much more professional than when I'm sitting here with my head down. You're seeing, you know, for the guys, the bald spot, and inappropriate. For some may think, you know what, it happens all the time, no big deal. The other thing to do, and I know this sounds odd, but if you do it, you'll thank me later. When you start the interview and everybody is there, Shift Command 4, actually it's Shift Command 5 in this particular instance, Shift Command 5, take a picture of the screen. Right there you have the person's name, their picture, your name, your picture, all the information that you need. Everybody try it right now. Shift Command 5 and then hit return. And you have a picture of your entire screen. You have a picture of me, the interviewer. You now remember who I am, what I look like, and my name. And so if there's any reason later to remember, God, who was that lady that interviewed me, automatically on your desktop. The same thing with Shift Command 4 if you want to take just a specific information. So let's say that you're going through this interview and you have one of those people who give you all the information you wanted to need about the company, and you know you have 5 more interviews following that one. Shift Command 5, I just did the screenshot of the company and all the information that he gave me. Shift Command 5, he just showed me an org chart, and now I'll be able to figure out all these people who I'm getting ready to interview and who they are and what they're doing. Shift Command 5 saves you in so many ways because you'll be able to capture your screen and any presentation that's being given to you during the interview process. The other thing is, before you get on that interview, go through your resume. Do not get on the interview and can't remember dates of when you did what, who you worked with, who you worked for. You know, I cannot tell you the number of times where I talk to people and I'll say, so it looks like in 2014 you were at so-and-so, and the person glazes for a second and I'm like, you don't remember when you were, wait, there's some part of this that you don't remember? And it is surprising how some people have not looked, they bring their resume, and then they kind of want to look at it while you're interviewing instead of knowing it cold. The other thing is, what reading your resume does before you get on an interview is refreshes your recollection and puts the key terms in your mind about jobs that you did. So you're not, if they ask you, you know, well, what did you do at Sun Microsystems in 2015? I'm not trying to, off the top of my head, I just read it. I can spill it off right back to you really quickly. And I can also do it in an elevator pitch, meaning an elevator means you get in on floor 1, you go to floor 7, in that period of time, you need to be able to tell me who you are. So that's number 2, is practice your elevator pitch. If somebody says to you, so tell me a little bit about you, they don't want you to ramble on for 30 minutes. They want your elevator pitch. What is your elevator pitch? So for every interview, especially a virtual one, I used to tell my CEOs, I used to take 3 CEOs a year and groom them. And one of the things that we would do for fun is we would meet somewhere for a drink. I'd put them in the elevator and I'd say, okay, you have till floor 7 to tell me who you are and what you want. And you can't just say, and here's what I want. You have to in that period of time, slow roll your ask. So that's the same thing for you. Pretend that you're walking up and down the stairs, get some exercise and practice. If somebody says to you in an interview, so tell me a little bit about you. What are you highlighting for that particular job? What are you, especially, how did the company get the return on investment on you? What did you do for them that was, you know, incredible, whether it was being part of a team that was incredible, whether it was an individual accomplishment that was incredible, whether it was, you know, closing contracts and allowing the company to earn 50 million in one quarter. People love numbers. Depending on what type of a job you have, they really like to hear that you helped the company save X, or your department helped the company save X, or your team helped the company save X. Do you have that information? You know, make sure that you go back and you think about what kind of questions are they going to ask. That's my third thing. Google interview questions. Just Google it. Interview questions. You can Google interview questions for accounting, interview questions for engineering, interview questions for an artist or design. Google has everything, and we need to embrace Google. And the reason why I say that is, I one time was interviewing for a company that had a new computer system, a new computer program, where your answers to certain questions identified whether you would be a good match. And I'm thinking, gosh, I haven't interviewed. I've been in this job for 8 years. We got bought out. I decided not to look right away. And now I'm interviewing after, you know, years. And I thought, I don't even know what questions to ask. Google is your friend. Hashtag Google is your friend. Go in and look at different questions. Call recruiters. You know, there are several people in African American Community Service Agency that have done recruiting, are recruiters. I know I'm going to do a shout out to my NCBW sister, Erica Alberry, is a recruiter. I know that there are several who, you know, you could call and say, hey, I participated in the AACSA interview event, and I just wanted to ask you, can you give me some of the more recent questions that people are asking in interviews? There you go. Same thing like if you're coming right out of college and you're doing your first entry-level position, or you're coming out of grad school and you're doing your first entry-level position. Who do you go to? You go to the career office at your school and say, do you have a list of questions? Every career office has that list of questions that people ask in your career area. So the other people who are your friends are the career officers. And if you don't think that they do a good job at your school, go to another school. Just, you know, you walk in and talk to somebody at USF and say, you know, I'm looking at classes at USF. I'm thinking about grad school, but I'm also interested in what's going to happen when I graduate. Do you have a good career officer? Next thing you know, you're asking her questions. You know, yeah, I'm interviewing. Do you have any questions on what, you know, you'd be surprised at how people share these days. And then my final thought is, while you're interviewing, this has been a monologue, right? I've been doing all the talking. No one's been doing the questions and answers at this point. No one wants to hear you talk for hours and hours and hours. I don't even want to hear me talk for hours and hours. Pause. Answer the question and pause. I think in our society, we are so needy to fill the gap in time. We don't want to just sit because we're afraid, you know, should I be talking? Should I answer? It's got quiet. Every once in a while, though, you need to, especially on an interview, because the person doesn't want to have to say, excuse me, can I talk? Or excuse me, you know, I have like 10 more questions and I only have 5 more minutes. So if you don't give them the opportunity to pause, you're putting them in a situation where they're going to have to be rude. In a regular interview, in a 3-dimensional interview, the person would sit back, or they would fold their arms. They would give you some kind of body language that would tell you, okay, thank you, my turn to ask, you know. So you just have to be real clear about that process. And then the other final thing is notice the body language. If I used to do this in meetings all the time. If the person sits back, I sit back. If the person sits back again, I move forward. You know, oftentimes they are trying to figure out, you know, who you are. you, and I'm talking for girls, women, obviously, make sure that your beard, all about your personal grooming. Think about that time that you went to church or you went to a gathering where there were going to be, lots of professionals. Remember, you've been at home for 3 months. What you look like now is not what you looked like 3 months ago. You had a haircut. Now you can't even get a haircut. So you have to figure out exactly how you're going to present yourself in that environment where you've been, stuck on a desert island for 3 months and you had to cope. And then finally, one last thing is make sure you have your go-to outfits. Everybody, even the guys, shirt, tie, jacket hanging up in the closet, button down with a nice pair of pants hanging up in the closet. And do not make the mistake of thinking that you may never have to stand up in an interview. If somebody asks you to do something or whatever, normally it doesn't happen, but it could. And of course, everybody needs to make sure that they know how to stop video and start video, even though that's extremely rude in an interview. You would never want to do that to somebody. But, if something was happening, like for instance, you sneezed and you went into a sneezing fit, you could say, excuse me, stop video, and pretend to sneeze and blow your nose and not do that in front of somebody. But it's not that different, again, from a 3-dimensional world to a 2-dimensional world, what you're doing, other than they don't really get to know you in this environment. So now I'm going to open it up for questions. I think we have in the chat room a couple of questions, and I'm not sure, Swa, how this works.
Yeah, so I'll call the questions out to you. We have
great.
a good conversation happening here in the chat so far. So the first question that we have is from Monica, and she's wondering, often we try so hard to fit into the norm of others. What about the issues of our hair? How do we present authentically?
You know what? It is a challenge. I think that the Crown Act made it clear that our hair is different. And I think that people have the right to wear their hair their way. But I also think it's about image. I know that my hair is pressed right now, but I know that my hair, when it's in its natural form, I can still shape it in ways to make it look beautiful. I can still twist it and knot it and curl it and do whatever so that it doesn't have to fit into the image of what is Caucasian. It just fits into the image of what is professional. And I think we've gotten away from that. But if you Google Africa professional woman, Africa professional men, you'll see trends of natural hairstyles, which embodies our culture, but still look professional. So I think that's the issue, is that I think there has been a trend to say any hair look in any way is the embodiment of my culture, where I'm saying, you know what, I'm gonna call foul, because I can still wear my hair in a natural form and it can still look professional. Then we have to define, well, what does professional mean? Does professional mean, how do I define? Now that is clearly something that you have to define for yourself. I would say that you look at the job as well. I know several jobs, kind of the Facebooks, the Googles, the Salesforce, where your culture is how you define it. There are very few norms when it comes to how I look or what my hair looks like. I know that in certain other positions, where it's more like, let's say it's more government-based, the Lockheed Martins, the General Dynamics, where it comes from a more of a military culture. I think NASA. I think you have to really define where you are, and if that is your culture, just make sure you believe that it's also professional.
There was also a follow-up question to that. There was a gentleman asking, what about if you're bald? What do you do? What are some tips to be mindful of?
I love it. Moisturize your skin. It's so surprising how many people who are bald and they have the stubble, like they're, think about you. I would say the same rules apply to your head that apply to your chin. If you're gonna go bald and shave it off, and make sure on the day that you go, you've I actually would say, unless your hair grows really fast, shave it the day before so you don't nick it, and if you do, it has time to heal. You don't want to go in there with a little gash. But, moisturize it, make it look very, very, very normal and relaxed. If it looks ashy and it shows up on the film, right? Because you're two-dimensional, again, but there's nothing to hide. I wouldn't, my whole senior team is bald, and they're all young. Everybody, I don't know for sure if they all just shave their heads. And of course, this week with no barbers shops being open, it was surprising how one after the other, they all shave their heads. But what's happening now is we're getting the stubble growth, and people are trying to figure out, what do I do with that awkward stage? And now we're seeing the baseball caps, which is not cool. No hats whatsoever on a call. Unless, of course, you're interviewing for a position with the Yankees and you throw on a Yankee hat, or you're interviewing with the Warriors and, you put it on just as a cute, and then you take it off for the interview. I hope that helped.
Yeah, so there's another question here about, you shared with us the tip about shift command 5 or shift command 4. There's a question about, what if, some of us are not on a computer, you might be on a tablet or on a mobile device of some sort. Does that command also work on mobile devices?
It doesn't. On a device, you have to do the capture picture, which is the hold button and the top button at the top. So you'd have to do that. You know what? Let me just say, I would suggest, if you can, don't ever do an interview on your phone. It's impossible to turn the ringer off. You don't want to get a call in the middle of your interview, and your screen is too small. So you're like this, trying to squint on a call, or you're too far back, or they can't see you. Now, a tablet is a different thing, as long as it sits up as a, but you can't sit there and try to push the center button and the thing. It's not going to work. It's only going to work on a computer. And, depending on what type of an interview that you're interviewing for, to the extent that you can borrow one. It's better to do it on a laptop than it is on a tablet or a phone.
Thank you for that. Here's another question. What about humor during an interview? What are your recommendations there?
Be careful. Be careful. Humor is, what one person finds funny, the other person may find embarrassing or hurtful. So, it depends, if you are a norm. Also, it may be a sign of immaturity. It's kind of, it depends on where and how it's brought into the conversation. It is never good to tell an off-color joke. It's never good to do something that reminds something of something you've read on Facebook or Instagram as a joke. Even if it seems like it might be relevant to the issue, it's just not appropriate. You're not talking to your pals. You're talking to somebody who's going to hire you. And while it's great to smile, the other thing is, make sure while you're interviewing, you see that most of the time, and it hurts. After I go back, I'm like, oh my God, my jaw, 5 hours of smiling. The resting bee face is what they, I have it. This is what I look like when I'm concentrating and listening. Can't do that. Make sure you smile. But with respect to humor, first of all, you don't have time to tell a full joke. And if you're just kind of making a quip on something that's relevant, like, somebody says something and you say something else, if it's Urban Dictionary, they may not understand and feel embarrassed. If it's something that everybody knows, then that's okay. And like I said, it's a quip. But you're not going to sit there and tell a joke.
Right. Another question that we have here is just, what insights would you share with someone that is looking to transition into a new career in this process?
Well, I It's the same if you were doing a 3-dimensional interview and a 2-dimensional interview. If you're going to transition, you had to have done something in that line of business before. So for instance, if you want to transition from marketing to, let's say you want to transition from engineering to marketing. I don't know why, but let's say you did. You were doing engineering on a specific software tool. You would want to go to marketing, where the company that markets is a software company, because what is it? You have the subject matter that's needed to do the new job. You may not know marketing, but you do know engineering and you do know that product. So are you a good marketer for that product? Absolutely. If you went into your own marketing team, and let's just say, you were not, you were more outgoing, and everybody's like, God, you'd be great for marketing. One, you can talk the talk, and two, you're outgoing, which means that, there might be a situation where you're going to be dealing with engineers, and you can fall back into whatever speak or whatever messaging that you did in your engineering side, but still go market. So the same thing with anything else. If you were in medicine and you wanted to go into law, and again, I'm bringing some really esoteric ones, but if you were in medicine and you wanted to go into law, what would you do? Medical malpractice, right? You take that medicine and move it into law. So whatever you're doing, look and see, and let's break it down even more. Let's say that your position included managing a team. Let's say you were in a store and you were managing a team, and you were responsible for closing the cash register at the end of the night. And you were also responsible for sending company emails to the team and making sure that certain HR policies were followed. Okay, now I want to move into a Google. On your resume, you have management, you have accounting. You can't say you were an accountant, but you have money management, you have HR experience because you were responsible for all of the HR activities at your company. So what you do is you take all the elements of what you did and you see where do they fit in a new role somewhere else. So again, you go on LinkedIn and let's say you were that store manager, you put in, people management, and see what kind of jobs pop up. You put in, let's say that you were the manager, but most of your job was scheduling your employees' hours and handling all the financials and accounting and the payroll and all that. Wow, don't you think you could do that job for a company where you're either responsible for handling the money, managing, accounting, or whether you're, a scheduler, maybe you're involved in HR and you're responsible for, all the scheduling that takes place. So take an aspect of look at what you're doing and see where each element of what you do fills a role somewhere else.
That's great. Thank you, Eileen. Another question here we have from Crystal is, what are some suggestions for job searches outside of the most popular areas? And I'm not quite sure what Crystal refers as the most popular, but maybe you can refer to some of the popular ones and some unpopular ones, or unknown, not as well known.
Sure. So whenever let's say she's talking about trying to get, not engineering, math, whatever, but let's say she wants to do something, different that she doesn't really see jobs out there for. LinkedIn, #LinkedIn is your friend. You literally would type in the job description and it will tell you in people, and it will give you a list of the people who are doing that job. So let's say welding, let's pick welding, right? It's very, I know when I get my email from Indeed and different things like that, I never see welding. So welding, I type welding into LinkedIn and there's a list of all the people who do welding and all of the jobs that are open in welding. So then I start looking at the people who do welding. What company are they working for? And then I go to that company and I see, do they have a welding 1, a welding 2, a welding 3? oh, they have tons of welding positions open up. Just because I looked at, let's say I looked at Andrea Griffin's name and she happened to be a welder and she worked for, United Manufacturing, and I go to United Manufacturing and there's like 10 positions. So, or you can look for that position. You could look for that position with that person. You can join LinkedIn and you could send that person a message in LinkedIn and say, I am interested in a career transition. I've been doing this on my own. I see that you're doing exactly my dream job. Would you mind talking with me? Now, LinkedIn is one of those things where some people don't get notices. So they don't actually see your message until maybe, a month later. So don't get disappointed if it doesn't work right away, because oftentimes I will get something and somebody will say to me, oh my God, I don't follow LinkedIn that often. But that's one of the ways to do it. The other way is, again, the career office at whatever college you went to, the career office at whatever college you live near, especially the state college and the community and the JC. They are by law required to assist the people who live in their areas. So even if you don't go to school there, they are there to facilitate the citizens of their county, city, wherever they're located. So you should be able to go to any state or city college and say, I'm interested in welding. I don't see anywhere. I went to school in Missouri. I'm here in California now, looking for a job. There's also a place in Sunnyvale, over by the Sunnyvale Library, called SCORE, S-C-O-R-E, if you live in California. And SCORE helps you find jobs. It actually helps you transition from one job to another. There was a time where Lockheed Martin laid off, we went from 30,000 to 8,000 employees. And part of the ability to do that was to create a organization that would help people find future transition. And that's what SCORE does. So you can go there, you can sign up. They help you with interviewing, they help you with resumes, and then they actually will help you figure out how to transition. Even if you don't know what you want to do, they will help you figure out what you want to do.
That's really helpful. We have another question here about, and this one's from Darius. What does a reasonably perfect and professional resume look like? So maybe what are some of the components that one should consider having on their resume?
Sure. Gosh, that's a real tough question. And the only reason why I say that is, some people love to see a very clear, very light resume, just, the name of the company, the name of the title, the name of the, one-liner. Others like to see, the company name, your position, why you left, especially if you have multiple jobs within 2 years of each other. So my resume, for instance, I've had 9 jobs in the last probably 11 years. And the reason is I work for startups. They get sold, they get bought, they get sold, they get bought. We go from one to the next to the next to the next. Every 3 years they get sold. So I did have to, acquired. My company was acquired. So it doesn't look like I just am getting fired all along, right? So it depends on what your resume, what you're trying to say and what your resume has. But let's say you're just starting out in the world. If you're just starting out in the world and you may have like 1 or 2 positions, you would definitely start out with your name and all the information. If you just started out and you only have 1 or 2 jobs, I would go with my school history first, recent education, and then I would put my job, and I would put I would put at least 2 jobs. And, the other thing I tell people all the time is volunteer work is a job. Mm-hmm. You can list your volunteer work as AACSA as a job. You have a title, you are working, and you have responsibilities. And so based on that, you just put that in there and you put on their volunteer service. And again, all of the key elements of what you did in that job, you put down as impacting whatever job you're looking for. I hope that helps. But go to a resume service, go to SCORE. SCORE is a great place. They will look over your resume. It's even worth it to spend, if you can, everybody within their means, maybe $50 to $100 with a resume writer. And I'm sure AACSA has a list of, or may have a list. If they don't, I'll make sure they do.
And Maisha has been great. She's been posting some of the resources as Eileen has been sharing with us. So for example, siliconvalley.score.org, right? That information is in there. So Maisha, thank you for adding that. Those were the last set of questions that were in the chat box. What else are you all wondering about in your process and your journey that we have all of this sage wisdom that Eileen could share with us?
Did you want to open it up so they can talk? I don't mind.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, and you can also have the ability to unmute yourself if you have a question, but I will go through here and unmute folks.
The other thing is, while she's doing that, you know, it is really important, if you can, to talk with people who are doing the job that you aspire to do. So for instance, if you want to, you know, or work at a company where you want to work there, and you can do it well in advance of having the position open. You can do it well in advance of even wanting to leave your position. I know that several people, when I was at larger companies, would reach out to me and say, you know, what's it like at this company? I really would like to work there. And I would invite them to an event at that company and then introduce them to like the hiring manager of the area where they were. And it'd be surprising at how sometimes they would end up working there, or other times they would end up, I'm sorry, I'm hearing, oh, that background noise. Otherwise they would end up saying, yes, now I'm interested in, oh, it says I'm muted. Am I muted? Okay, great. And then they would say later, you know, hey, I went ahead and interviewed and I got that position. Or they would, I would leave the company because I'm going on to something else, and I'd hear back, oh yeah, I'm working at that company. So I always tell people there is such a thing as an interview for a position that doesn't exist yet. And I have set that up several times. I've had people call me and say, you know, I'm interested in an engineering position at Apple. Do you know anybody in engineering? And I will, you know, get they'll send me their resume with an intro statement that says, I am currently doing this, but I've been looking at Apple. It's a great company. I've been looking at engineering. I'm in the process of getting my degree. I'll be ready in about a year. And then I forward it on, and the person who I forward it to becomes their mentor, and they start mentoring while this person is getting ready to graduate. And then when they graduate, that person who I introduced them to is excited because they have a recent grad. They're fulfilling their recent graduate quota, which, if you don't know, a lot of companies have a recent graduate quota. And you have to have been, you know, recent grad means you haven't passed your year anniversary. But they have special money to hire recent grads, so recent grad money. And then moving forward, that person has a job there in the company. So as you start looking at positions and you're ready to make that jump, start talking to people who are in that industry or in that company. And then also just, you know, go online to Eventbrite and go to some of the events at the company. There, you know, during Black History Month, for African Americans, every single company hosts some kind of a presentation or an event or a speaker series. Go to them, meet people at that company. I know most people, that's how they work there. I mean, I know most people who work at Facebook have joined Facebook because they knew somebody who worked at Facebook. And I could probably say the same as Google, is a lot of people get their job through referrals. And we even get paid. Like at my company, we have a $1,500 referral for engineering right now. If one engineer brings in another engineer, they get a $1,500 bonus.
Eileen, as you're talking about some of that, one of the things that I frequently hear is, you know, when you look at the job description that's posted by the company, what if I don't have all of the preferred requirements and I have some of the required requirements? What are some of the things I should be thinking about in terms of how I tailor my resume to look suitable, like a suitable candidate for that role?
Oh, this is a great question, actually, because it brings in two issues. So one, we do want everyone to make sure that when they're interviewing for a position, they highlight the information that's more important to that position. But you have to be careful, because if you have a LinkedIn page, I do this all the time. I will read the resume and then I'll go look at the LinkedIn, and it's clear that what's on LinkedIn is different than what the person put in the resume. So for instance, somebody really wants this, let's say I want a manager and I'm really focused on getting a manager. And so this person may not have been a manager in the past, but they have, you know, some management skills. And let's say they manage for like 3 months or so. And so all they do is focus in their resume on management. Man, I did this, I did this, I did this. And then that's great. And then I go to their LinkedIn and it has no management at all on it. It's like, okay, how far did you stretch yourself to give me that modified resume? So be careful. I'm not saying you can't do that, because it's easy to explain that. You can say your resume on LinkedIn is general in nature, and you know you're capable of doing these these things. And then with respect to the management role that you have at this company, here's the, you weren't a manager all the time, but you had these specific aspects. So just be careful when you do it, but definitely do it. Do not send a marketing resume to an engineering team, or do not send a sales resume to a marketing, that people will just immediately say she doesn't meet the requirements. Now, the other thing is, I believe that we, African Americans, women in general, have a tendency to say, if I don't meet every requirement on there, I am not going to apply. I have people who say, oh my God, I only meet 7 of the 10, really 6 of the 10. So, I think I'm going to wait and not apply. I'll wait till I get, no. You are self-editing. Go apply for that job. You don't know whether the 6 features that you have are the most critical and the ones that they need. And they may even say, well, this 7th area is really critical, but you can learn it on the job because you've done this and this and this. And that's another thing, is always, how many people have a job right now where even though they thought they knew what they were doing, when they got on the job, they learned the job. They really did not know that job. I mean, there's a lot of it that they learned on the job. That's with most positions. When I started at Lockheed and then I wanted to leave, I've been in the government space. I had never done anything in the commercial space. I was general counsel of a company. I hadn't been, really in a small one focus area. I had been doing very broad, and I was a little worried. I jumped off, boom, all of a sudden, rock in that area, no problem. Learning on my feet, being very adaptable. And I think that's what you have to do as an individual. And you've done it in so many other areas of your life. You're just not thinking that you can. But there's nothing that you can't do, especially in the first year when everybody expects you to ask lots of questions and get lots of information. And then what do? You surround yourself with like people. You meet 4 other people who are doing your job, and you grill them for everything that they're doing. You ask them, I need a copy of this. I need a template for that. I'm supposed to be doing this. Think about it. What am I supposed to be doing? That's what your mentors are there for. So again, LinkedIn is your friend. You go onto LinkedIn, you find that position that you're looking for. You find 5 other people who you might know. That's the beauty of it, right? Because it tells you who you know and 3 other people who might be able to help you with it. So you get the introduction to people who are doing the same job you are planning to do. You meet them. They tell you, oh yeah, that 7th and 8th requirement, no one has that. Or the 7th and 8th requirement, you can learn that on the job. It's not critical. And next thing you know, you're applying for that job. But I would much rather have somebody pass over my resume than I pass over my resume because I didn't even submit it.
I like that. Don't self-select out. We have some questions coming in here. So another one from Crystal. What's the best way to answer the question about, during the interview process, they'll ask you, what are your weaknesses? What are the good ways to answer that question?
I always answer a weakness with a strength, right? My weakness. Oh my God. I'm a bit of a workaholic. I really need to, the work-life balance is not my best. Uh, you know, they love to hear that, right? That's a weakness, but it's not. You're like basically telling them that you're workaholic, you're going to be down there working for them. Another weakness. Oh God, a friend of mine had a really good one. The workaholic one is always the best. I think that one is, the work-life, you're horrible at work-life balance. You know, another weakness could be that, you got to be careful not to say that you're slow to decisions, because somebody will think that you're not going to be able to push a project forward. You can't say things like you are impulsive, or so you have to come up with something that sounds like a weakness, but it's really a strength. And I think, like, for instance, that you're a workaholic. One of the things that I always say is that, sometimes I over prepare. Like I have a tendency to, worry about whether or not I have enough information, or am thinking of all the different stakeholders. Again, that one you have to be a little bit careful, because you don't want somebody to think, oh my God, this person can't get it together. But you can say things like, yeah, I just, I want to be very thorough, and I don't want to be slowing down anything, but I want to just make sure I dot my I's and cross my T's. But then in situations where I know we need to get something done quickly, it helps, because I have, patterns of checking things off and doing things that allow me to work quickly. And so you turn that proclivity for detail into a positive.
That's great. Another question here. So going at the start of the interview process, sort of, but what would you say is a good time to start negotiating salary? I think Derek is asking this question, and it's a tricky one, right, Eileen? Because sometimes you'll find a recruiter will even ask you the question, what are you looking for to get paid, right? Or what amount do you have in mind? So when would you say is a good time to start to respond to that question?
Later than earlier, and it's hard, because it's the first thing out of their mouths. So so how much do you think you should, like you said, what do you think you should get paid? In California, and in most states, an employer cannot ask you how much you got paid in the past. So they can't talk about your past pay to determine your future pay, which in a way kind of makes it hard, because then they have to ask you what you want to pay, and you don't know what the pay salary is. So I always counter with, well, what is the pay salary? What is the pay grade? And what is the high and the low? And then that way they have to tell me the salary range. That's exactly what I'm asking. What is the salary? So if somebody says to you, what would you like to get paid? And then you say, well, what is the salary range for this position? Is this a senior position? And then go back to talking about what type of a position it is first, and what the roles and responsibilities are. And I would say, and if they say, well, do you have a number? And you say, well, no, not yet, because I'm trying to understand the scope of the job. I'm trying to understand, am I reporting to the CEO? Am I reporting to a manager? Am I working on a team? And also, I would like to know what the salary range is. And then by looking at the salary range, that in most instances, they're supposed to go at the half to 45 to 55% range on a salary grade. So they're not going to start you off low. They're not going to start you off high. But if you look at that, if they tell you, well, the salary range is this to this, or they probably won't, they'll probably say, well, let me get back to you on that. And then they may do an in run again at some other point and say, well, what were you thinking about salary? And you could say, oh, well, I'm waiting for the salary range. Can you give me the salary range? And you just keep doing that. The other thing is, talk to a recruiter, find out, go on Glassdoor. Glassdoor has all of the salary information for most jobs. I think they're probably the best at accurate salary information, because again, it can only come from people who are doing that job. But it does also kind of give you a huge range. I mean, it could be like 20,000 to 80,000. It's like, that doesn't help, But talk to other recruiters in those positions in other companies. I think that's the best way. And I always tell people, interview for the jobs you don't want. So if you see a position that you really don't want it, interview for it anyway. Gives you experience interviewing. Tells you what the salary range is for that position that's similar to it. Gives you all the questions that you're going to need for an interview. So go right now, if you're not even looking for a job, go interview just to see what types of things are happening in the interview space. And also, it'll be your first interview online and you'll get some practice, because who wants to have their dream job be their first interview in a Zoom? Not me.
And I know I'm continuing down here the chat group. So again, if someone has a question, you are free to take yourself off mute and ask your question out loud. But in the meantime, I'll continue on. We have a great number of questions here, Eileen, coming in the chat box. So here's one from Terry that's asking, if you're laid off or even fired from a previous employer, is it legal, right, or lawful for the company you're interviewing with to ask you what your reason was for leaving? And I know it varies by state as an HR professional, but what would you say to that?
So they cannot ask the company what happened. All they can ask your company is what the period of your service was and your position. They cannot ask why you left or if you were fired. So given the fact that your employer does not have to state, you don't either. You can't falsify your resume. You can't lie. So it's kind of a difficult situation, right? Because you don't want to lie on your resume. You don't want to lie to the recruiter, because if they find out that you did lie somehow, you could get fired for that, right? Because you have to be truthful in your negotiations. So instead, I would come up with a rationale. And usually I would say I left. You don't have to say you fired. You could say I left. That doesn't mean fired or non-fired. It means that you're no longer there. I left because it wasn't a good fit for me. That's always a good answer. And that's usually the case. I mean, unless you did something, crazy, in most instances, it's not a good fit, right? You're not performing well. It's not the job for you. It's not the team for you. Whether it's the team itself or whether it's you, who cares? You're interviewing for another job, right? So the goal is to take the emotion away from it, take the hurt, take the experience, shelve that somewhere. Don't need to deal with it anymore. It's over, done. Not gonna follow you for the rest of your life. And I know that's the hardest thing in the world to tell somebody, but you got to do it. And I remember the first time I was laid off, we were selling the company. We were all going on waves, and but it still hurt, and I knew it was happening. I mean, we were all, they were letting go of the entire company. They did it, Sun Microsystems to Oracle, but it still hurt. And so in that situation, it was great because I had a story, right? My story was the company was sold. They didn't keep any of the employees except for a certain number that were working on Java. And I was one of the last. I helped close it down. I did this and this, but if you actually got fired, you could decide one of two things. You don't have to put that position on your resume unless they say this, is this a complete, accurate, no one does that in HR. No one says. They may ask you though, what was the gap? And then you can say, well, I was doing some work here and there. But again, you don't want to lie, but you don't want to, you don't necessarily have to say everything. I have a lot of positions. I've helped several startup companies. A lot of those are not on my resume because they weren't truly relevant to my employment. And then a lot of people have 2 or 3 jobs, so do you have to put all of them on there? No, put the ones that are relevant. And if they ask you, then you can, if somebody has, a need and says, is this complete? I've never heard a recruiter say that. But again, if it's relevant to the job, the market that you're in, so like, let's say, you did work at Apple and then you are moving over to a similar position at Google, and people are going to know because they remember working with you at Apple. You want to put it on there and you want to have a story. Why did you leave? And the answer is it was not a good fit. I wasn't, it was a team environment. They were working on a technology that, I wasn't, it wasn't something that I wanted to be involved in, and but there wasn't any other teams, and so I stayed for a bit, and then now I'm looking for this type of a team because this is the area of my expertise, or this is an area that I really wanted to focus on. It's okay to say that, but have a story.
Yeah. And as we have about 4 minutes here, I'm just going to shout out a couple of things. Maisha has been great at adding resources that the agency has. So as you all are asking questions in the chat, know that Maisha is providing some resources. And then also want to acknowledge Meg and Lisa, who have been great here in providing some additional supplemental responses, Eileen, to what you've been sharing. So
I'm loving this. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Lisa. I'm reading these. These are absolutely amazing. You guys should have joined me on the panel. This is wonderful. Thank you, Lisa Aiken, and thank you, Meg S. These are great. And definitely, here's 2 more people that you can reach out to and talk about jobs and the job environment. SWAT also in the employment space. I mean, I bet if you looked at the people, hi, Vera Y is one of my sisters in the Links and also the 100 Black Women. She's been the former president. She's in the D&I space, but she is just a wealth of knowledge about what's happening in, she's at Intel. And so she can talk about, the Intel environment, but she can also talk about what's happening in the environment. So reach out to us at the 100 Black Women, reach out to AACSA, reach out to the Links, reach out to your sorority sisters and brothers. There's a wealth of people who are in the roles that you're aspiring to or that you're currently in.
That's wonderful. And as you all are thinking of other questions, I mean, we have about 2 more minutes. I think, Eileen, I want to call out some of the things that I heard you say, and please chime in with just other elevator things that, right, top of mind things that folks should just walk away with. I remember hearing you at the start of our talk. You mentioned the visuals matter, is how I wrote it down for myself. Whether it's your physical appearance, the camera height or the camera angle, right, the background, right? You talked about making sure that whether it's what's on your mug or your glass, being cognizant of that, making sure that we have something to write on, folks. I have a notepad and like 50 pens here, so I'm always ready for that. So have that. And then the trick that you share is that's available on from a desktop perspective, but the Shift Control 5 or Shift Control 4, that ability to just take a picture. And then you talked about ensuring familiarity with your resume, right? Making sure you're practiced and rehearsed in your own story so you don't look surprised when the interviewer asks a question. And then Google searching, doing a Google search or any browser search for interview questions, right? There's so many, there's the behavioral-based types of questions and things of that nature, but just making sure that you're at least practiced in that. And then you said body language. So if the interviewer is leaning forward, you pay attention to that. If they're leaning back, you pay attention to that. But mirroring is something to be cognizant of. And then the last piece that I really enjoyed, just because you're always a fashionista to me, but you said, make sure you have your go-to outfit ready, right? Gentlemen and ladies, make sure that outfit is ready and that you have that, that you can continue to use so your appearance and what you're portraying is what you really want the interviewer to see. What else would you want to make sure that you leave us with today, knowing that you're here to wealth?
I would just say preparation before, during, after. And then also try it out, go interview for a position that you don't necessarily care about, but you'd be surprised. You might even want that position. But also, get on a Zoom. I mean, it's surprising how many people do Zoom. I mean, it's not surprising how many people do Zoom, but it's surprising how many people who don't Zoom or don't get on Google Hangouts, who don't know the technology and wait till the very last minute to try to figure it out as they're trying to get on the call. And by the time they do, they're so flustered and, trying to calm down and relax. So be prepared, get on early, try it yourself, try it out with a friend, and then know people who are in the position that you're interviewing for and talk to them about it. Or go to a place like a college recruiting area and ask them about that position and what you should be prepared for. But also interview. Don't hold yourself back. If you only meet 5 of the requirements, 6 of the requirements, submit your resume anyway. don't don't self-delete yourself from the process by not applying. And I also wanted to thank Maisha. Maisha's been sending out lots of messages here in the chat, so thank you, Maisha.
You're so
And
welcome.
Swat, thank you so much. I appreciate all your efforts in monitoring today's event. It's been a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks everyone for joining. We hope you found your insights and nuggets of wisdom that you were looking for, and we hope you find yourself ready for the next opportunity. Thank you.
Good luck.